Everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Book Passage. This is going to be a fantastic night tonight. I think you're going to get a bang out of two fantastic authors that we have here for you tonight. Um, Turn that up for you. Um,
Can you guys hear in the back?
can you hear me okay back there?
No.
They all said no.
We'll be shouting.
I think this is personal. Yeah. Um, Two fantastic authors tonight. I'm Jim Latwell, one of the faculty members for the Mystery Writers Conference. It's my great honor to introduce the two authors that you're going to see tonight. I'll start with Tim Maleeny. Tim is a best-selling author of the Cape Weathers mystery series. It's one of my personal favorites. It's smartly written. He's won the McCavity. He's won the Silver Falchion. He's been, I think one of the books was named as the Killer Book of the Year by the Independent Mystery Writers Association. I mean, it's really fantastic. There's a quote that I had to pull up here just so I don't mess it up. Book Reporter called him one of the new princes of detective fiction. Yeah. So, Tim has the privilege tonight of interviewing our guest of honor, Michael Connelly. Michael is the author of 41 novels. I mean, you think of names like Harry Bosch, Jack McAvoy, Mickey Haller, Renee Ballard, and now a new character that we're going to hear about tonight. I mean, this guy has done it all. His debut novel won the Edgar. He's in 2023. He was the Grand Master for Mystery Writers of America. So I think you're in for a fun ride tonight. It's going to be a great conversation with two wonderful authors. And please welcome Michael Connelly.
All right, here we are. You ready to go?
I'm all set.
All right.
All right.
All right. We're going to start by talking about your new book. We're going to talk about your other books. And though I'm not a detective like Bosch or Ballard, I've picked up enough clues that I think you might have one or two fans here. So no doubt they will have questions, which we will get to. There will be a mic passed around. Everybody will have a chance to ask questions. I want to talk about Michael's new book. And then talk a bit about writing, especially in the spirit of the Mystery Writers Conference for the writers here, and then open it up to you to ask anything and everything that you want to ask of Michael. And that front to back, we should only be here like 4 or 5 days. It'll be great. Let's start with Nightshade. I was telling you back there, I finished it yesterday, read it in 2 days. It's a great book. It's also a great Michael Connelly book, and it's somebody we haven't seen before. So let's start with that. Talk to us about Detective Stillwell.
Well, sure. This all came out of, I see a lot of familiar faces here, and so if there's anything I try to do in my books is I get inspired by real stuff, and mostly characters. But at some point a while ago, I learned that on the island of Santa Catalina, off the coast of L.A., it's falls under the jurisdiction of the county, and so it's the L.A. County Sheriff's Office. And I heard that they had one detective out there. And I met a guy he wasn't out there anymore, but he had spent 20 years as a detective out there. And, that's like, I'm not dumb, so I know when that's a cool idea, like the lone detective, Gary Cooper, all that kind of stuff. And what I also liked was that he had to handle, or she had to handle everything, from shoplifters to school truants to murder, if there's a murder. And of course, I had to put a murder out there, but there actually hasn't been one out there since I think '94. But now it's really a violent place because I'm there. So And so I just, I write mostly about Harry Bosch in my career. So it's kind of like, I hate to say it, but it's like murder, murder, murder. So I was always looking for things that could bring variety and to what they do. And from that, the challenge would be to, find drama in a shoplifting case or whatever. And I did this once before when I introduced Renee Ballard. I met a detective who was a homicide detective, but I said, how'd you get into the detective work in the first place? And she said, I took the job no one wanted, the midnight shift detective in Hollywood division. And she had to take on everything. And so that really appeals to me. And so that's what was going on here. Plus you have the whole thing about, Catalina is not that big. The city of Avalon, which is at its center, has only 6,000 residents. More than 1 million people visit out there, so it gets crowded. But it gave me the opportunity to have like some real local knowledge working for me. And the whole idea of little town, big crime was not something, I've been writing about Los Angeles, which is big town, big crime, So I'm at this point in my career, I was really looking for something different, but within my little box of what I do, like, Los Angeles. So that's really where it came from. And I wrote a short story about the lone detective on Catalina Island. I think it was about 8 or 10 years ago. And then I immediately regretted that because I turned it in because I said I would, but then I realized that was a book that I just turned into a short story. So I waited some time and went back to it.
Talk a bit about, you mentioned it's under the jurisdiction, right, of the mainland. That's one of the dynamics of the book that's really interesting is who ends up on Catalina, and you have sort of this sense of, okay, did they mess up over here to end up here on the island? And that's kind of an undercurrent of some of the Stillwell character, right?
Yeah, and it's the main character's name is Stillwell, and he's not necessarily a misfit, but he's put in charge of, it's kind of like the island of misfit toys, and that's reality. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. I wish I could say I'm this creative genius who thought it all up. But it's kind of known in law enforcement circles, like, if some guy screws up and is getting sued, well, you can hide him out on Catalina Island and then once the suit is settled, then you can fire him. But you don't want to fire anybody before it's settled because that's an admission of, yeah, we messed up. So there's a little bit of that going on, and so I like the idea of this veteran guy who his problem is he ran afoul politically. And so he's kind of sent out to do his time on Catalina, and from the beginning, before I even wrote a page, I knew that it would be a guy who doesn't want to be there but learns he should be there and wants to be there by the end of the book.
One of the things that's interesting about the way you set that up is that tension between, okay, he gave something up, and to your point, where does he really belong? But to pursue this investigation, he has to walk a very fine line between, I'm an officer versus, okay, maybe I'll tell headquarters I'm doing this, maybe I'm not, maybe I'll cross the line a little bit because someone's got to care about this.
Yeah, and also that's exactly right. But adding to it is that it's an hour boat ride to get out there, and so sometimes they can't wait around. They got to cut corners and they got to make do with what they have in terms of personnel and their individual skills and so forth. So all that was really attractive to me, that I could kind of have this little world out there. And of course, the people from the mainland and the people in charge of the sheriff's department and the homicide investigators and all them, they come out, and that causes a lot of friction. So it was kind of like, again, I didn't have to be a creative genius. All this stuff is right there, and I'm just happy I discovered it.
So you mentioned the short story because we've been living with Bosch for so long, and you've had Bosch in your head for so many years, decades, right? And here's a new character. In many respects, his moral compass is very similar, right? Everybody counts or nobody counts, but he's not Bosch. He's a completely new character. Talk a bit about that, about having Stillwell in your head and just making that distinction in terms of starting something new here.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you set up challenges, as you know, with what you're doing, and it dawned on me because it was on my mind that this was going to be my 40th novel, and it's like, wow, how did I get here? And and then I was kind of thinking about what I've done for the first 39, and I realized I've never written about a character, even Ballard, who's well adjusted and comes home and says, "Honey, I'm home." You know, and I've been married for 41 years, and it's like, what's the psychology behind that? Um, and so that to me was a challenge. It's easy to write about someone who's missing something from their life, and is looking for it, you know, or yearning for it and missing it. I shouldn't have said it's easy, but it's easier to write about those kind of people. So I that was the main challenge on this book was I'm going to write about a guy who has a relationship that's pretty solid, and I got to explore that actually for the first time in 40 books. So that was the fun part of writing this book.
That was a really, it's funny because I had a long list of questions I want to ask you about the book, and I threw most of them away because I don't want to give anything away about the book. And there's so many different things happening, especially in the beginning of the book, where's this going to go? The relationship, though, that you mentioned with Tash is so critical to that. And to your point, it's well adjusted, but it's not like things happen and don't cause tension in any relationship, especially when there's a cop involved and when there's a murder involved.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I probably oversold the relationship. They have some issues, but I set it up that she's someone who grew up on the island, a native of the island, and doesn't have the need to leave, you know, and doesn't want to leave. And circumstances in this book make them leave for a while, and she's not happy and all that kind of stuff. So it was really a lot more relationship stuff in this book than any book I've ever written, I think. So.
One of the things you've always been brilliant at that struck me in this book is the procedural, the attention to detail. But what's amazing, especially about the first 4 or 5 chapters in this book, back to the Catalina thing, is there's all these different things. I think the end of the first chapter, because he's moving around in golf carts, right? You've got the radios. It's a small force. It's a small geographic area. Mm-hmm. That's part of a much bigger geographic area that's very isolated. So talk a bit about, as a writer, because I realized 3 chapters in, not only is the sense of place so real, but things like he's got to grab a new charged radio. You got to make sure you plug in the golf cart, things like that. How do you balance the mundane with the movement in such a way that it's so real for me as a reader, but I'm never slogging through that stuff. It's just sprinkled along. So talk a bit about just getting that pacing right and maybe that detail. And is that happening as you write, or are you going back and filling that in?
No, I mean, yes and no. I mean, some of it's in there from the beginning, but I do a lot of rewriting. Every morning I rewrite what I did the day before, so I have a kind of built-in rewrite in my first draft. And I love those kind of details. I like to collect them. I had this sense that I used to at a book signing I would say, raise your hand if you've ever solved a murder. And I'm not doing that tonight because I've seen 3 homicide detectives in the audience. So, but normally no one will raise their hand. And so, how do you connect a reader to Harry Bosch or Stilwell? And it's you called it mundane. I never use that word because I don't want to insult the reader, but that's where you connect with people. It's like having to charge your car, and that kind of thing, and the little parts of life, and I just think that's how you're trying to build some kind of connection between a reader and a character who does stuff the reader doesn't know anything about, and the little details can cement that relationship.
You've got a moment in the book where Stilwell's filling out forms for the search warrant, and it talks about all the details he has to get right in the paperwork, because then later, if he gets the guy or the gal, whomever the perpetrator is, everything can collapse with the defense if that one starting point is wrong.
Yeah.
And those details, suddenly you have a new level of, not only is it more real for the reader, but you in that you've conveyed how much he cares. Like he's thinking about the end game, not about the paperwork, right? Not about the job.
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of stuff I love just knowing about. I spend a lot of time with the kind of people that I write about, and it's not connect the clues and arrest the guy. It's like do it right, or it's going to come back and blow up in your face. And I, as a journalist for a long time before I did this, and I wrote those kind of stories where search warrants were kicked out, the case gets kicked out, and somebody, a bad person, gets away. So yeah, I mean, and that underlines the difficulty of these jobs that people are basically volunteered to do. A lot of pressure, a lot of consequences, and yet they do it, and very little thanks, and that's probably why I've been stuck for 40 books writing about cops and so forth, and defense lawyers, because they have to do the same thing.
And there's some tension in there, right? Because we have some cops in the book who are more interested in clearing the case than letting it be messy and following all those threads, right?
Clearing it in their mind, yeah. I mean, just get it done and get on to the next one, but it could all fall apart if you don't do it right.
Yeah. Talk about the research around the boating world. How much of that was familiar to you? How much of that was new in terms of down to the anchors,
Yeah, that was fun because I got to, I grew up in South Florida. I grew up fishing. My family had boats. I grew up diving, and I've never written about that stuff. And so that was really cool. And, I'm 68 years old, so it was a long time ago for me. So I had to update knowledge and things like that. But, all the stuff about sailboats and sail bags and all that stuff. And as I'm writing and Googling and all that kind of stuff, it was a lot of fun, actually. It was just like, oh, cool, I can do this, I can do that. And now I forget because I've written a book since then, so my head's always in the book I'm writing. But like I think the name of the brand of the anchor is a real brand, but it worked perfectly and that kind of thing. So all that was really enjoyable.
Yeah, no, that was incredible actually, and it took you deeper into the island, right, in terms of the dynamics there and who knows who.
Yeah, I mean
world
it's a small world. It's all about that harbor and servicing people that are mega rich to fishermen who go hungry if they don't catch the fish, that kind of thing. So it's a microcosm of the whole world in a town of 6,000, and then you have all the tourists that never stop coming off the ferries and all that kind of stuff. Really, I'm going to write about them again. I know that. I mean, I always, whenever I do a new character, they start out as a standalone, and by the end of the book, I know whether I'm going to write about them again. And I don't always. There's been a couple books where I never came back to the characters, but this one I know I'm going to come back to, and I look forward to doing that.
I can't wait. No, it's like I said, it's incredible. All right, shifting gears. So I don't know when you sleep, but you seem to be a busy guy. In addition to the books, the 41 books, you've got some things happening in TV these days. So let's talk about that from a writing standpoint. Because I understand you're often on set and that whole process, both in terms of how you balance your time between the books and the TV, but also has that changed how you've thought about writing the books, just in terms of, because it's a completely different form, right?
Yeah, I mean, I should dispel that idea that I'm really busy. I mean, I'm always writing, but I don't go to set a whole lot. Where I invest my time on the TV shows is in the beginning, in the writing room, and in casting and some of the initial big time decisions that are made. But once they're made, and I have a sense of who's in the writing room and who's the showrunner, which is the creative boss of a show, once I can trust them, I don't have to be there. And I would rather, I'm an introvert. I mean, just standing up here explaining myself is not anything that I'm kind of comfortable with. It's like, we like being in a room by ourselves. That's the thing. And so I try to get to that room as much as I can. I realize that when I do show up on a set that the word spreads. That's the guy who wrote the book, and I can be a cheerleader and say it's looking good and that kind of stuff. But I don't know the first thing about camera angles and stuff like that. I do know about writing, and scripting is quite different. It takes out a whole third of what I love about writing, and that's interior thought. And so I've written scripts for these shows, but they often get rewritten by better people than me, better script writers. And, I kind of learned my lesson. So I went several seasons where I didn't write any scripts anymore. But then we put Ballard into the last episode of Bosch, and I wanted to write that. And I wrote it but my smart move was to write it with the detective who she's based on. And so I had her there to tell me the best dialogue and all these things. And so that script was kind of easy to write. But otherwise, I find it very hard, and I would rather, I feel like I get more accomplished back at my room at the house writing books.
Yeah. And that's Mitzi Roberts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about that. And Rick Jackson, he's going to be here tomorrow for the Mystery Conference doing another thing with you about that collaboration with actual detectives and how that process works with you.
Well, I mean, it's vital to what I do. Whether it's detectives or lawyers or whatever. As I said, I'm a former journalist, so I kind of know how to get what I need for story, and it's very important to me. And I'm very, very lucky that these people will spend time with me. And they're not. I don't call them sources because they're very good friends at this point. But there's so much luck in what I've done. So Rick Jackson, who will be here tomorrow, I mean, he's here now, but we'll be talking tomorrow. I've known him for a long time. So when he had a partner named Tim Marsha who he brought with him, and so he becomes a friend and someone who tells me about their lives. And then once they get to be really good veteran detectives, the department's smart. They split them up and have them work with younger detectives, and that's how I met Mitzi Roberts. So she came in as these guys, worked with both of them at different times, and was helping me with Bosch books long before in fact, I was stupid. I mean, I was using her to make Bosch books better. And then one day offhandedly, I said, by the way, you became a detective very young in your career. How'd that happen? And she said, I volunteered for the job nobody wanted, which was the midnight shift detective in Hollywood. And it was like, oh, why did I wait? Why did I know it for 5 years before I asked that question? And again, it was similar to the idea of Catalina, because she said I had to handle everything, from drug dealing to murders and that variety is like, after you've written like 15 Bosch books where it's murder, 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 that stuff is really attractive to me.
That's one of the things that was so cool about Nightshade is how much is, again, island, small town, golf carts. So much is going on, though. It's not just the procedural stuff, but again, not wanting to give anything away, the first chapter, there's one crime that is referenced, and then there's another, and the more you pull on that thread, the more things get bigger and bigger, which it sounds like is much more real life than, I'm doing one thing for 3 weeks and then solving it, moving on to the next thing. And the interconnections in this book, you don't see them coming. And then when they start layering up, it's just incredible.
Yeah, well, thank you. But yeah, I mean, it was all there for the taking, kind of, and yeah, I mean, I found there's a lot of times I was amazed by I went out there several times while I was writing the book, and I've been going out there, not a lot, but I've been going out there for almost 40 years since I moved. I moved to LA in '87, and within a year I had gone out there. But it just offered a lot of different social geographic. Everything was different, so it was really attractive to me. I mean, the place is 100% dependent on tourism. So that allowed me to have like a mayor, like the mayor in Jaws, who doesn't want a body pulled out of the water in front of, all the tourists.
It's funny you say. I thought of the exact same thing when I was reading. I was like, okay, this is bad news all day long for a place like
Yeah.
this, right?
A very public event like that. So, I mean, I've never written like stuff about that kind of issue. And so there was a lot of fresh stuff, even though I've been writing murder stories, I guess you'd say, for 40 years. There's a lot of new stuff in this for me, for the writing of this. And so it was kind of a blast to write this book.
Yeah, even the interesting comment because it not only had that feel, but everything's high stakes there because it's all interconnected, right? In that small space. You have a murder here in Marin, it's just another Tuesday. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about TV versus movies because your stuff's been adapted for film and then television. I was talking to a couple of the writers earlier about how television gives you that longitudinal ability to build characters in place and everything else in the way that you really can't in movies. But I'd love to get your take on that.
Well, yeah, I had a couple of movies made, but it's been a long time, and the movies were made before the advent of streaming, and streaming really leans on character building, and so even though it's probably very cool to have movies, the way to go if you do what we do is to try to get something on one of these streamers because it's all about character, which is what made us writers in the first place. And so, yeah, a couple of movies I had nothing to do with, and one was good and one was bad, but, so I'm batting 500 there. But I think these shows, and then also I got on Bosch when Amazon didn't know what they were doing, and they actually said, like, we're only going to do this if you come with us. And it's like, that's never been said in Hollywood, by the way.
No, that's a writer's dream. Usually, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
they take that and say, yep.
Yeah,
Adios.
normally you just get patted on the head and said, go write another book or something. We'll handle it from here. That kind of thing. And it was quite different in the streaming world. Netflix was the same way. What most notable about Netflix, it had been a movie of Matthew McConaughey, and McConaughey kind of owns that character or did to a degree. And they were saying, like, we're going to go with the book. The guy was Mexican American in the book. That's what we want to do. So there's a loyalty to character and story I've found in the streaming world, and then just why if you can get I think there were 98 episodes of Bosch. If you can spend almost 98 hours delineating a character, why do that instead of 2 hours? You know? So
yeah, no, it makes sense. Also, I mean, the series are great, and it's telling that the Bosch fans love the series because exactly to your point, you often don't see that. It's like, no, I don't want to watch. That's not my books. That's not my character.
Yeah, I mean, I think if people give it time, they love the character. But I mean, it's a weird thing, that you're really playing with what's sacred about what we do writing books, because it's your imagination, and then you're kicking off the reader's imagination. And Bosch was in books for 20 years before it was a TV show. So all this, and I spent very little time describing him because I trust the reader to build. I write the way I read. I like to build characters in my head visually, and that's what I do with the books. And so for 20 years, I was saying, you build Harry Bosch, and then suddenly he said, this is what Harry Bosch looks like. And so there's a lot of people who have never seen the show. I mean, the people will come up to me in stores and so forth and said, I love the books, but I can't watch that show because I got Harry Bosch in my head. And I'm very much aware of that, but as a storyteller, you just want to, you want to hit all the bases if you can, if you get that opportunity. So that's what I've done.
You were writing for about 10 years, tell me if this is right, before The Black Echo, just playing around, trying to figure it out while you're working as a journalist. Is that right?
Yeah, but that phrase, playing around. That sounded like my wife, because she had to have a lot of patience for those 10 years while we made a deal like I'm gonna
Banging your head against the wall.
yeah that I would work and I mean I had a day job and all that, so our deal was 4 nights a week, 4 weeknights I would write and one weekend day, and that lasted a long time, and I was having fun, like playing around, and I was seeing improvement. That was the most important thing. But so it's not like, oh my God, I had to do this for 10 years before I had any success. Those were great 10 years. In many ways, when I didn't know anything about publishing, they were better for that, because I was kind of oblivious to a lot of things, and it was good. And as I said, your growth or improvement was almost exponential then. And it's harder to see that now.
I was going to ask you about that because, like, 41 books in, what do you do differently? And obviously, there's a confidence level, but I'm sure some things are always hard, and then some things maybe you've got down. So talk a little bit about that.
I mean, to me, the challenge is to not be distracted. I had teachers in school saying, if you're going to be a writer, write every day. And I've tried to do that. And there was probably a 20-year run where I literally wrote every day, and that's not that way now. And that bothers me. And, so I'm always kind of chiding myself. I got to get back to writing. I can't go 3 days without writing something. And so now it's just about not resting on laurels and avoiding distractions and hopefully raising the bar every time.
We talked briefly about the decision to have Bosch age in real time, and you mentioned that comes with some things you have to bring along, but you mentioned you don't regret that for a minute, and I think that's such a key part of the character.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. I mean, Vietnam, I was in the last draft, so I did not have a Vietnam experience, but I was on top of it because I thought it could be where I was going to end up. So it had an impact on my life, and I had a friend whose brother got killed over there. And, so I very early, I said, I want to write about a guy who has had that experience. And so and when you do that, that's all good and that's fine. But who knew what I was writing in the 80s, I would still be able to write about this guy, almost 4 decades later. So again, I was very lucky and now, but I made a choice early on to age the character in real life. That came out of me being a journalist, and I kind of saw this idea that if I do have some success and I can come back to this character, it's almost like an anthropological study. I might be able to show a character evolving against a city evolving over time, and what a gift. And so I have no regrets. Harry Bosch is 75 now, and I've said in the books he was born in 1950, so it's I'm running out of time with him, and when I say running out of time, I mean believable time. That it's believable that he can do what he does. But I've also been lucky in that there's been an advent in the last 10 years of bringing older detectives back, and we can talk about that with Rick. Rick's not as old as Harry Bosch; he just acts like he is. But people who have retired and still have skills to look at a murder book or look at a crime scene photo and have some ideas are being brought back into police departments. Rick Jackson's still solving murders, and so that's actually given me an uplift that I can still have Harry Bosch help out and mentor and every now and then run.
Short distances.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one more question for the writers and aspiring writers here, and then it's up to you to ask questions. You mentioned write every day, and clearly if you want to write and if you want to get published and you want to be in this world, it's a stamina game. What other advice would you give to writers or folks who want to write crime fiction?
I mean, yeah, I mean, everything is a cliche, but the cliches are cliches because they're real. I mean, they're true. But I don't think you should ever like read somebody else and say, I'm going to do that. I mean, I think it's got to come from inside you. Someone's going to speak to you about a character, and you go from there. You just got to keep your head down, never lick your finger and hold it up to the wind and to see what's selling or anything like that. Just keep your head down. And I always, again, I'm a writer, so that means I'm a thief. I take inspiration and so forth from all kinds of things, and I think the best. It's not my advice. This is Kurt Vonnegut's advice. He was asked that question, and he said, "Make sure on every page everybody wants something, even if it's just a glass of water." And I think that's right there. That's crystallized what it's about.
You mentioned the gift of some of the decisions you made. I want to thank you for the gift of all your books, for Bosch, for the whole world you created, and everything else. So thank you for that. And now it's over to this highly suspicious crowd to dive in. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to pass the mic so we can hear.
Speak right into the mic.
How's this? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
You mentioned that you have days where you rewrite, but what camp are you in with outlining and scaffolding versus sitting down and being zen and just letting it flow?
I'm not even sure what scaffolding means when it comes to writing. I have stuff that it gestates in my mind, so I'm carrying a few book ideas all the time, and something happens where they come together and I start writing. So I don't do any outlining. When I spend time with Rick or somebody, I don't write anything down. It's weird. The only thing I write down is the book, and that's probably why I rewrite every morning. I print something out, mark it up, and a good day for me is like 7 or 8 pages. So it's not a big thing to edit 8 pages, and then I just So in my first 2 hours are that, and I usually feel pretty good about that. And it's a dangerous way to write if you don't outline. I know that. I haven't written a book yet where I didn't go down a wrong path and throw out pages and that kind of thing. And that becomes a skill. You got to know when you've made a mistake, or and you got to know. Sometimes you got to delete a lot of pages, but it's just and you get better at that as you go along. But yeah, I don't know. That's just the way I've written. So in my head, when I say stuff is gestating, I kind of come to a point where I know how this is going to start. I know something about the character, if it's a new character, or I know it's a Harry or a Ballard story. And then I don't start writing till I have a fairly clear idea on how it's going to end. And it might be the end of how the case is solved, but it also might be a character thing, like at the end of the book, he knows this. I just gave away that at the end of this book, this guy knows he's found the right place for him. I didn't know when I started writing it who did it or anything like that. I just knew this guy's not going to want to be here, and then he's going to want to be here, and he won't leave. And that's what I had in my head when I started writing. So now he lives at the end. So
that's the only thing we'll give away.
I just want to read a question from online viewers. Will there be a second season of Ballard? And it's very nice to see Bosch in some episodes.
We don't know yet. It just came out last week, so we're awaiting numbers and all that kind of stuff. But it did well. I mean, it was #1 for like a week or something, and I don't know. I sense that it will, but I mean, in terms of Hollywood terms, it has not been green lighted. But they did take the first step, and they said start writing a second season, and that's a big step because that costs them a lot of money.
Yeah,
that's a good sign.
Yeah.
So, excuse me, with your 41st book, and a career that has spanned such a long time, being an introvert, being in a room like this, do you ever take a look back and think about where you started, where you are now, knowing that when somebody finishes one of your books, they turn that last page and they're ready for your very next book to start immediately.
No, I mean, I do all the time. I mean, I treasure it. It's hard to understand. So you just have to treat it as something sacred and that you got to take care of. And that's why I said before, like, you got to raise the bar. You can't coast. That's disrespectful, actually, to the people who are reading your books. So, but yeah, I mean, I want to keep moving forward at all times, but lately, these days, it's hard not to look back and say this is unbelievable. You know, that like a guy like Harry Bosch has spanned 3 decades, and I, you know, I'm pretty old now, but there was a time where I realized I'm going to be able to do this for the rest of my life, and that moment was, you know, pretty amazing. And you know, it's the moment that hopefully every writer gets, but they don't. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. It's you know, I'm pretty. I try to be pretty humble about it because it's really hard to explain.
Because Bosch is such a cultural icon now, and he's been interpreted by other people, actors, narrators, directors. So, did you ever learn something about a character you wrote because of someone else's interpretation, and did that affect you going forward in how you write that character?
I would say yes. I think Titus Welliver, who plays Harry in the shows, he brings so much to it, and I've learned a lot from him. And we've had many, many discussions about what he pulls from the books, what gets translated into scripts. A couple of years into the show, we started bringing him in, and I've written, I think, 3 scripts with him because he's really the owner of the character now. He's the embodiment of the character, and I think he plays him so well, and his voice is so perfect. It's funny, people say, do you see Bosch? I mean, you see Titus now when you write, and I don't, because for 20 years I built a character in my head, and also the character in the books is about 10 or 12 years older than the guy in the show. But I think his voice is so good, and I think actually dialogue is more important than what someone looks like. It's what they say. And so when I write, I hear Titus's voice, but I don't see him as Carrie Bosch, but I certainly hear him, and I think that's more of an inspirational thing to have.
We have a question back here.
Hi, I just wanted to know, what was your favorite crime series when you were growing up, when you were younger?
Probably Kojak. I used to watch that with my dad, and then probably Rockford Files. So I don't know if any of you have gotten into the Ballard show yet, but she lives in a trailer, and it's the same parking lot where the Rockford trailer was parked, and that's an Easter egg. That's our little nod to that.
That's great. That's so great.
Okay, I've listened to all your books on audio, and I've watched all the episodes. And what I find fascinating is how the storyline changes. And I'm curious, who decides what's taken from your book and what is not, and what's put in the television series and not?
It's kind of a communal effort. I mean, you know, the showrunners are the creative boss of a show, so they, you know, I have discussions with them. About when they want to deviate and usually if it's a plotting thing, I say go with God. But if it's a character thing, I'm more involved in that, you know. And let me try to think of an example. I had the showrunners were very kind of concerned when they came to tell me this, but they were gonna have Ballard let a killer get away because she will come to realize they killed someone who needed to be killed, and And I said, I get all that, but Ballard cannot let a killer get away. You got to find a different way. You know, she can't consciously say, I'm going to let this one slide. You have to find another way. You don't want to bring, you know, it was a question of like, do we want to do all this thing where you get arrested and there's a trial? And so there's that kind of stuff that goes on. And, you know, I wrote a lot of Harry Bosch books before there was a show. So, and normally in these kind of deals in Hollywood, they buy one book, but Amazon bought everything. And so it became, we're never going to run out of stories. So take whatever you need from any book. And so most of the seasons took from more than one book. I mean, every season did actually. And so there was a lot of discussion about that. And I just find that when all the writers are in the room, it's usually 7 or 8 writers, including the showrunner. Most of my shows have 2 showrunners that they split duties and so forth. And I just always loved that. You know, I don't think I've written a perfect book yet. So when someone has a new idea, like, why don't we do this instead? I'm pretty accommodating. I'm not, you know, every now and then I'll say, no, let's not do that. But I mean, like letting a killer go, and that's a character decision. Plotting decisions I'm okay with, but I'm like, I try to be the keeper of the character as much as I can. And that is interesting. At one point, and I'm not going to forget what the issue was exactly, but it was Titus Welliver who came to me and said, did you read episode 5 or whatever it was? And I said, not yet. I'm busy here writing a book, Titus. What's the problem? And it's and he said, I don't think Harry would ever do this. And I already brought this up with the showrunner, and I'm getting pushback. And, you know, so then I got involved, and he was right. And so that became a big, you know, a war of minds and so forth. And that was kind of a tough call. But, yeah, it doesn't happen that often because I'm okay with them. I don't know if I should give this away, but I will anyway. So, like I said, we got a green light on season 2 of Ballard, and so they're adapting The Waiting, which was a book that came out last year, and Ballard gets her badge stolen and decides to find a way of getting it back on her own, and they're doing all that. But that in the book, that led to stopping a mass killing. And the showrunners say, we don't want to do a mass kill. We don't want to have that as the end. So they came up with another idea on why her badge was stolen. And I kind of liked it a lot. So I said, yeah, go. You know, sounds good.
I love Bosch's philosophy, the everybody counts.
Sorry, clicking off.
I love Bosch's philosophy. Everybody counts or nobody counts. I'm wondering what was the inspiration for that? Was that something you came up with? Did you hear it somewhere else? It's an amazing thing that is a great character piece.
Thanks. It has its origins in a story I heard. I mean, no one ever said to me everybody counts or nobody counts, but it was this detective who helped me a lot with the character. Told me about before he was a detective and he was a patrol sergeant, that he took his mom on a ride along, and they got called to a gang shootout where 3 people were late at night in a closed Kmart, big parking lot. They all shot at each other and 3 people were down. And he said to his mom, stay. I mean, this was actually, we put it in one of the shows with Maddie Bosch, but I get emotional about the story. But he told his mom, I got to take care of this scene until the detectives get here, so stay in the car. Don't get out of the car. And so then he took charge of the scene, and one person they knew was not going to make it. He was still alive, but he's on the ground. He was shot multiple times. He wasn't going to live. And so they were really dealing with people that were going to live. And at one point, he forgot about his mom, and at one point he checks his car and it's empty. And then he sees his mom holding the hand of the guy who's dying. And he goes like, Mom, what are you doing? What are you doing? And she said, I don't think anyone should die alone. And it was kind of from that, and he goes, that saved me. I was going down the cynical road that a lot of cops go, and that kind of revived my life as a cop. And it kind of just came out of that. And that was like, I think he told me that story well into the writing of the Bosch book. So that Everybody Counseling didn't get mentioned until I think 5 books in or something like that. It's hard for me to remember now, but that it all had its origin in that story.
2 questions from our online audience, streaming audience. The first is there a reason behind not revealing Stillwell's first name?
Wait for the sequel. I don't know. I mean, Stillwell is the name. I like the name because it has a resonance, and you know, we're all. The sermon here is that it's all about character, so never miss a chance to say something about character, and that would include a name. So I like that his short name, he could be shortened to Still, and people call him Still, and no one's gotten around to saying his full name. But I got the name from a friend of mine. His first name is Steve, so maybe that's his name. I don't know. I haven't decided.
No, not sure. We need to know because that was cool. Yeah.
Maybe it's Hieronymus Stillwell. I don't know.
Stay tuned.
Okay, given Harry's love of old school jazz, which adds to so much of his character and the tone of the series, are you a jazz aficionado?
I would say I am now, or I don't know, aficionado. I mean, I like jazz a lot, but it was a choice when I first gave it to Harry. It was my father's music, not mine, and so I used a lot of stuff I remember hearing in our house and records that I saw in our house, but it wasn't my stuff. But you know, I was a journalist. My first 4 books I wrote while I was still working journalist, so I know how to do research and stuff. So I started delving into jazz and going to jazz clubs and all that as research, not because I loved it, but now I would have to say it's my favorite kind of music. My dad had it right, even though at the time I was Led Zeppelin, man. So
one thing I really like about the Bosch. One important aspect I really like about the Bosch TV show is his house. It seems perfect, and it's almost like that's exactly how I pictured it when I read it in the book. I was wondering, how did you find that house, and how do you have permission to keep using it for 20 years?
Your mic kicked off at the end. The question was, the Bosch's house is so perfect. How did you find the house, and how do you get permission to go back to that house? Is that a real house?
the house in the show is much more grander in terms of its view than the one in the books. But anyway, when we were making Bosch, one of the key producers had produced the film Heat, the Robert De Niro and Al Pacino movie. And he was kind of known for still having a Rolodex and kind of legendary because he'd been producing movies since the 80s. And so in the movie Heat, that was the house that Robert De Niro lived in, and he knew, Bosch had a view of the city, and the guy who owned that house was still in the Rolodex, and he called him and rented it again. And what worked for them in Heat and worked for us for many years on Bosch was that the guy lives in New York and has a business which is an adult film store in Los Angeles. Called the Pleasure Chest, and he used the house when he came out to check on his business, so he could do his schedule around our filming, and so we got to use it for 10 years. But I mean, we had problems with it because it's very expensive to film up there because it's on top of the hill and you can't get trucks up there. So much about making a TV show is about where are we going to park everything. And so we had to ferry everyone up in vans. So we tried to shoot there as minimally as we could. And normally we would end one episode on a day filming there and start the next episode. So you could just be there one day. And yeah, and then one time, and then, we pay the guy to use his house, and one time then we come back for another season, and he renovated it with our money, and so there's one season where there's plastic hanging, and someone says, "Harry, are you renovating?" He goes, "Yeah, working at it," and we were just covering up what the owner had done to the house.
You don't have that problem in books, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so is it working?
Yeah.
So I was wondering, writing about a criminal defense lawyer in Lincoln Lawyer versus writing about a cop trying to get criminals off versus trying to get them convicted. How did you shift your perspective for that? Was it real different for you writing the two different characters?
Yeah, obviously the characters are different. They're kind of flip sides of the same coin. They're an integral part of the system, and that's the old reporter in me. I kind of wanted to cover the waterfront when it came to the world I was writing about, and plus my college roommate became a criminal defense attorney, and so water seeks its own level. I knew I had an in there, and I went to him and I said I had met this guy at a Dodger game. He was a lawyer, and he told me he worked out of his car. So the light bulb goes off, and I went to my college roommate and said, "Can I be a fly on the wall and watch you work?" And I did that on and off for about 5 years before I actually wrote the book. But that was another one I thought this will be a one-off. I write detective stuff, but I just loved the character so much. By the time I was finished that book, I knew he would be coming back. So in my last rewrite of that book, I planted the seed that his half-brother was Harry Bosch, because I knew that could be something I could reap down the road.
You talked about trying to get 7 or 8 pages done a day, but do you have a typical writing day? Do you start early in the morning? Do you have 5 cups of coffee first, or are you a nighttime writer?
I'm a tea guy, and I love writing in the morning before you get this sense that you're the prince of the city, like you're working before anyone is even awake, and which is phony, but it's very conducive to me creatively, so a really good day for me would start while it's still dark, and and if I get to lunchtime, probably means I've had a pretty good day.
And you don't have a word count or any goals like that. It's just you're writing every day, see what you get. Yeah.
Just never had the word count. I have this idea that every day I should move the story a step forward. And what is a step? It could be a really good piece of dialogue. It could be somebody finding a clue. It could be a character thing. I just have to feel like I accomplished something. And the 7 or 8 pages doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes it's 2, but they're 2 good pages in my opinion, or they've really advanced something. I just feel if I advance the story every day, I'll have a book before the year's over.
Back here.
Well, so this is probably so it's a little bit of a repeat, but it just seems like you're very methodical, process driven. Is that like you've always been that way? You were born that way, or did you train yourself to do that because you knew that was critical to do your job well?
I don't know. I think I've had I would credit my parents. I think I've always had a pretty good work ethic. I always worked a job since I was 13. And when you're a newspaper reporter, you got to write every day. So that was really helpful to me, I covered crime in Los Angeles, so I was writing a lot of stories. And I think that really kind of helped me. And also at one point, when the newspaper business was flush, I worked for what they call all-day papers, where they would put out different editions through the day. And so I often had to rewrite crime stories to make it sound like I have new information when I really didn't. And so that really helped me with that every morning rewriting thing. I think it came right out of those days as working for an all-day paper.
Hello. It's on. In all of your TV, films, and book, major and minor, who is your favorite character to write about?
That's kind of hard because I love whoever I'm writing about, but it's Harry Bosch brought me to this world, and his longevity still astounds me. So it's got to be him. And I really subscribe to that. What this gentleman said, everybody counts or nobody counts, and that's kind of branded with him. And so at the end of my days, if that's what's left or that's what's remembered, that's what will be important to me. And so I have to say Harry Bosch. But when I'm exploring like a character like Steve Stillwell, I'm in the moment of what I'm writing, and that nothing else intrudes, and I love that character the best as I'm writing them. By the way, going back to the Everybody Counts, I saw a talk by a federal judge last week. I'm reminded by your hat, resist fascism. This is a guy who's like knocked down a lot of the stuff Trump's doing for the federal court here up in the Northern District of California, named Charles Breyer. And he was giving a talk, and he started by mentioning everybody counts or nobody counts. And it's like I know I'm bragging here, but it's like when something like that happens, when it jumps, to that level, it means so much to me. So again, it's all going to come back to Harry Bosch whenever I'm finished writing.
Okay, we're going to take one last question.
I want to circle back to something Tim and you were talking about earlier about 10 years of fooling around. Were you actually working on a specific book? Did it take you 10 years to write your first book, or were you doing ideas and then finally settled on one? And how long did that one take?
No, it was, I wrote 2 books no one's ever seen or read. And they were, my learning period. The 10 years would include writing the first book, the one that got published. So over a 10-year period, I wrote 3. The third one got published. And, we're all our harshest critic, as writers. And so I knew those first 2 should not be published, but the second one was better than the first. So I was encouraged, and I felt good that I was, nearing something. And then the third one, me being an egomaniac, I knew this has got to be published. And so it went that way. But when you see those kind of improvements, it keeps you going. And so I actually look at those 10 years as a fun 10 years.
And you were changing jobs. You were working as a journalist, but you were changing papers at the time as well.
Yeah,
biographies, right?
I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I worked for my hometown paper till I was 30, and then I got an opportunity to go to Los Angeles. So first 2 books were set in Fort Lauderdale. They were somewhat inspired by a private eye I had written a magazine story about. Back then, Fort Lauderdale was like the runaway capital of the world, and this guy had this business where people in New York and Chicago and so forth would hire him to find their runaway kids, and the books were about that guy, and they weren't good enough to be published. So I thought, I'm 30 years old, I'm going to take one more shot at this. I had that deal with my wife, and we wanted to have kids and stuff. So I was going to take one more shot, and I wanted to shake up everything about my life. So I moved 3,000 miles away to Los Angeles, and that seemed to do the trick. And actually, the day I started work at the LA Times, there had been this heist of a bank over the weekend. I started the Tuesday after Labor Day in '87, and during that weekend, these guys tunneled up into a bank vault and broke open all the safe deposit boxes and stole everything, and they got away with it. And that was one of the first stories I wrote about when I came to LA, and that became the plot line of my first book. How did I give up the other 2? Well, I got to the end of the story. I mean, I guess I could have. I mean, I could have kept rewriting them or something, but I don't know why I didn't keep rewriting them. I just moved on to the second one. It was the same character in both. He wasn't Harry Bosch or anything, but yeah. So, and that was part of the shakeup. I'm going to write. I mean, I love detective novels, private eye novels. That's why I wanted to be a writer, like Ross McDonald and Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett. Those were the people that inspired me, not police detectives. But I had this access. I had a press pass that got me into. I was talking when I got to LA. I was talking to maybe 100 detectives a week. So it was like, what are you, stupid? Like start writing about what you see every day in your daily life, and that was also one of the things that changed everything for me.
On behalf of readers everywhere and writers in this genre, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.